A discussion that titillated the media for days and weeks on end was President Donald Trump's bold proposal to make of Canada the 51st state. Americans grew enthusiastic, media coverage was skeptical, Albertans had proposed taking them alone as an addition to the United States. But since then, the discussion has seemingly calmed and gradually faded away. Understandably, the administration may have other priorities at the moment, but have American ambitions for Canada really vanished? Not even just Canada, but ambitions for the much-desired Greenland as well. In the case of Greenland in particular, certain moves have been made to orient treatment of Greenland from an extension of Denmark and Europe to an essential part of the North American sphere, namely placing Greenland under US Northern Command, symbolically showing to the world that the US considers Greenland a part of its domestic security space, in practice undermining Danish claims to the territory and opening the door for increased US military presence in the area. At the same time, a rival like China has taken to referring to itself as a, quote, near-Arctic state, increased its investment in icebreakers, and is closely monitoring resource discoveries on the island, of which there was a major recent discovery, finding a large deposit of rare earth elements. With Greenland having recently rebuffed an effort by Trump to invest $120 million in resource extraction, concerns are no doubt rising in Washington that Greenland may seek to partner with China at the exclusion of the US, or at the very least, fail to harness its resource wealth alone. Likewise, Russia has begun attempting to muscle itself into this sphere, warning of military action if conflict breaks out over Greenland. And even in spite of Denmark's resistance to American influence on the island, they could not stop themselves from approving the establishment of new US military bases in Greenland. In that time, the US has raised its military presence in the region, stationing nuclear submarines nearby to deter Russian encroachment. This is a scramble for power that is developing slowly but surely and won't just evaporate on its own. Keep in mind this is only Greenland we're talking about. We've yet to address the elephant in the room, that is Canada. But all of this is interconnected as the United States moves to assert exclusive control over its sphere of the Arctic, both for strategic and economic reasons. As tense these circumstances might be, there is a viable path forward that will give the US what it wants, while addressing the needs and concerns of Canada and Greenland. Hello audience, Mr. Z here with another video for you. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We have videos like this on history and politics every week, so if you enjoy that sort of thing, do consider subscribing and remember to stay tuned. Rather than see the United States annex the entirety of Canada, as many have jumped on and as Trump himself has teased, I'd like to propose an alternative I call Greater Alaska. Alaska is the United States' northernmost territory and presently the only real foothold the US has in the Arctic. What the concept of Greater Alaska would suggest is an extending of Alaska's border across part of British Columbia and the Canadian territories of the Yukon, Northwest Territories, and Nunavut. These are not provinces of Canada's, but territories which lack sovereignty, do not directly control their natural resources, lack major development, and are effectively operated at the whim of the federal government. Properly annexing these territories into Alaska could not only stand to benefit the United States, but Canada and the territories themselves. How, you may ask? Canada's territories make up approximately 40% of the country's landmass, however have a population smaller than the state of Wyoming, barely registering 100,000 citizens combined. With the bulk of Canada's population concentrated in the provinces, and specifically in its east, the territories are remarkably underserved, lacking critical infrastructure including a major electrical grid, reliable all-season roads, clean drinking water. Even housing in the territories is described as shabby, outdated, and severely overcrowded. The problem is, with just how underpopulated the territories are, Canada cannot justify developing so large a region which comprises nearly half of its entire landmass, tragically leaving the population with some of the lowest living standards on the entire continent, and easily far below those of even the poorest US states. While certain market forces did play a role in the poor economic situation faced by the territories, federal neglect and regulation also left these communities destitute, as resource extraction, namely mining, is often the sole economic pillar holding these communities up, and with so little infrastructure, even that is costly and less preferable to cheaper overseas alternatives. The result of this is that the territories depend upon federal subsidies for anywhere from 70 to 90% of their government revenue, starkly contrasting the provinces, which typically range from 10 to 20. These situations significantly contribute to a reality in which Canada cannot effectively defend its Arctic possessions from growing encroachment by Russia and even China, who are outpacing Canada in their Arctic defense. The Canadian government has assessed themselves that their Arctic defense capabilities are stagnant at best and deteriorating at worst. Canada's territories are effectively in a worse version of Greenland's situation, underpopulated, underdeveloped, and underdefended, largely because the countries responsible for them are unwilling or unable to step up to the plate. At the same time, with Canada's refusal to fully develop these territories, they're condemned to be a perpetual money sink, costing the government tens of billions annually. Canada is like Cold War Portugal, desperately clinging onto its colonial territories, but failing to extract anything of great value in them, and on the contrary sinking money needlessly in the hope that they might one day reap the resource wealth of those lands. In 2008, Canada's Prime Minister Harper said the country has two choices for the future of its Arctic lands: use it or lose it. Nearly 2 decades later, how much closer has Canada come to using it? One highway, one Arctic research station, and the promise of just 2 new icebreakers, which have not been built yet and aren't expected to be ready for about another 10 years. Russia's icebreaker fleet is over 3 times the size of Canada's, having built several new ones since 2008. And while the US lags far behind in icebreaker fleet size, with only Alaska in the Arctic, there's not the same demand. Yet even during his first term, President Trump issued a memorandum to develop a plan for an entire new fleet of icebreakers, showing a sheer contrast in urgency felt by the US and Canada despite Canada's larger Arctic presence. While the US is in the process of acquiring Canada's territories, it may as well take Canada's icebreakers off its hands as well, for a generous price of course. And it will be generous considering many are old retrofits that are, and I'm not exaggerating here, only worth their weight in scrap. Canada's entire existing fleet is probably only worth about $2 billion, less than the cost of building one brand new battleship. Plainly, Canada does not have the means to protect its territories, which Russia and China are willing and able to encroach upon, which will then become a problem for both Canada and the United States. Canada is wasting money giving the territories band-aid solutions instead of fully committing to their development and enrichment, which could in turn have tremendous benefits for Canada's economy at large. Ultimately, the inhabitants of the territories have very little to look forward to under Canadian rule. If brought under the benevolent care of the United States, Canada's territories could be expected to be brought to a level of life quality comparable to Alaska. This means a higher life expectancy, revitalization of the resource economy, and diversification of the economy away from just mere resource extraction. Development of all-season highways and roads, building of major oil pipelines, establishment of major sea and airports, extending electricity across the territories, increased access to clean drinking water, cutting the cost of food by as much as half, a permanent fund dividend paid out to the territory citizens just as Alaska does for its own. The list goes on. Alaska isn't perfect. It faces its own shortcomings in the harsh high north, but when compared to the conditions in Canada's territories, it's a world of a difference, and a lot of that boils down to the fact that the United States is simply more capable of tackling big issues than Canada can, or even Denmark in the case of Greenland. Our economy is richer, our population is bigger, our military is stronger, we can provide the territories a life and a future that they simply cannot achieve in their current arrangements. And it's not one-sided either. The US is finding itself driven toward the Arctic by a lot of factors, including its own security. With the world changing as fast as it is, the United States, as the superpower of North America, feels an obligation to protect its sphere of the world. Because at the end of the day, we in North America have been able to be as prosperous as we have thanks to how removed we are from foreign threats, and that includes smarter, deadlier new weapons that can reach us from across the world in ways that they never could before. A firm position in the Arctic gives the US the best opportunity to flag and intercept any possible threat coming from Asia or Europe before it has a chance to strike us here. And the more we build up that Arctic shield, the safer the continent will be. Let's take a break right here. If you've enjoyed this content so far, I'd like to invite you to like the video and subscribe to the channel. We are aiming to hit 300,000 subscribers, so it'd be very much appreciated. Alright, let's get right back to the video. Naturally, there's also the great mineral wealth to be found across the Arctic, from oil to rare earth elements, and the US is among the few countries who can effectively harvest and harness those resources, enriching not just itself, but the communities that are just sitting on these literal gold mines without the equipment or government support to extract it. Beyond this is the fulfillment of America's ambition and right as the great power of North America to do what it must to make the continent a powerful and leading world player. We've heard talks of Trump's ambitions upon the Panama Canal and the asserting of control over the trade that flows between the Pacific and the Atlantic. But there is more than just a southern waterway. There is the famed Northwest Passage, which, as ice sheets recede, has become more accessible and viable as a water route between the oceans, one which China would certainly like to make use of to access European markets and vice versa. An acquisition of Greater Alaska and the Panama Canal ensures the United States dominates all trade moving between the oceans to its east and west, making us not merely masters within our own borders, but masters with whom everyone must deal, pay, and appease, if they want the privilege of passage. We effectively enrich the United States and bolster our global bargaining power with no risk of violence, and our rivals, who may attempt to pressure us through their own economic leverage, now find themselves in check. You pressure us, we pressure you. Now pay me. This is land that Canada cannot do anything with. In fact, when the waters of the Northwest Passage became navigable, world powers insisted Canada open it up to the world. Rightly, they refused to hand over something so strategically valuable, but now, how the hell are they going to enforce their ownership of it? Really, what is Canada supposed to do? The answer is sell it to a friend who can do something with it. Canada will save money which it can invest in its provinces, and will net a healthy profit from the sale. The territories will gain investment and development they never could have hoped for under Canada. The United States gains resources and a major strategic asset. North America as a whole benefits because the continent remains secure under the US's watch, not compromised and vulnerable to exploitation by foreign powers in Europe, Russia, or China, who do not live here but see this as a land to harvest and discard. Greater Alaska isn't just a good idea, it is a great idea, and one in which every party involved stands to benefit. But those are just my thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comments below, like the video if you enjoyed it, and subscribe for more. Mr. Z, out.